Comb among the distant valleys of medieval Japan, where morning mist clung to pine branches like a whispered vow, loyalty rose above all other virtues, shaping the inner world of the samurai more powerfully than courage, wisdom, or even the sharp edge of the sword. In that quiet order of feudal life, where each man's path was bound to another's fate, loyalty emerged not merely as an ethical demand, but as the breath and pulse of an entire moral universe, a silent law that lay deeper than written edicts, deeper even than the instinct to survive. Service to the master surpassed the tenderness of filial bonds, for the samurai believed that a family was granted by birth, but loyalty was chosen with full understanding, sealed by oath, and nourished by the discipline of a lifetime. It became a bridge that joined a warrior's name with eternity, for only the faithful were remembered with reverence, while the wavering vanished as if consumed by smoke on a windless night. In the quiet chambers of wooden estates, where lanterns burned with motionless flame, elders taught that a man's soul was not tested in triumph, but in devotion that endured misfortune, exile, or death. Loyalty demanded that the vassal's heart remain steady even when storms tore apart the world around him, and that he follow his master not because of fear or reward, but because the master embodied a principle higher than flesh, the principle of duty that shaped heaven and earth. Thus, a samurai walked through life with an inner stillness, knowing that his honor was not measured by victories, but by constancy. Even in the smallest gesture, a bowed head, a carefully chosen word, a step taken behind the Lord's back, there breathed the conviction that life gained meaning only through the act of steadfast service. As age-old chronicles recount, a loyal vassal did not fear losing his body, for he believed that death in fidelity was not an end, but a transformation, the moment where duty burned away mortality, leaving only the essence of a name carried forward by generations. He knew that betrayal killed long before the blade touched flesh, while loyalty protected even the fallen, lifting them beyond disgrace. And so, throughout centuries, samurai lived with this austere creed woven into their hearts like a thread of steel, teaching their sons that a man who serves faithfully never truly dies because his devotion becomes the spirit that shapes the memories of a clan. Yet behind this serene philosophy hid a question that would echo across the lives of countless warriors. If loyalty was higher than blood, and service greater than love, then what was demanded of a man when the master's path led into darkness? And what awaited the vassal who followed without hesitation, knowing the cost could be everything he possessed? Among the silent corridors of feudal mansions, where sliding doors whispered like distant winds, loyalty revealed itself not as a simple allegiance to a mortal man, but as a deeper, almost sacred current known as chūgi, a merging of devotion and duty so complete that the samurai who embraced it no longer existed for himself. In this solemn architecture of spirit, the vassal understood that the master was not merely the one who commanded food, rank, or protection, but the living embodiment of honor itself, a vessel through which the intangible laws of conduct took visible form. Thus, to serve the master meant to serve the higher order of the world, and each gesture of obedience became a reaffirmation of a spiritual harmony that bound warrior and lord beyond the fragile boundaries of time. In the shaded gardens where moss muffled every footstep, old retainers often taught the young that true loyalty was not measured only by deeds performed in moments of glory, but rather by the quiet endurance of hardship and the disciplined calm with which a man accepted the burdens placed upon him. Chūgi was a vow without an end,
stretching beyond the years of earthly life. One served not only in living flesh, but also in the unseen realm where, according to ancient belief, the loyal soul continued to walk beside the master even after the sword had claimed his breath. It was said that when a suzerain died, a true vassal still guarded him, stepping into death without trembling, for loyalty did not dissolve with the body, but remained the final proof of fidelity. This spiritual bond shaped the warrior into a reflection of the Lord he followed, allowing his own identity to fade into a disciplined clarity. Through long nights of vigil, when the cicadas hummed and distant drums echoed from neighboring provinces, samurai trained their hearts to remain unshaken, believing that personal desires must fall silent before the higher rhythm of service. In this way, the vassal became a mirror. He absorbed the master's virtues, strengthened his intentions, and honored his decisions even when danger approached like a shadow moving across a paper wall. The master's fate was his fate, the master's burden, his burden, the master's downfall, his own descent. Yet within this absolute devotion lay a truth that few outsiders understood. For the samurai, to lose the master was to lose the access of one's existence, and thus even death itself became a continuation of duty rather than its end. The chronicles speak softly of retainers who followed their lords into the afterlife, believing that loyalty must never be severed by the knife of mortality. It is here, in this austere merging of lives, that chūgi reached its highest form, shaping warriors whose spirits remained bound even when the world tried to pull them apart. But whispered through these same chronicles was one more lesson, a warning, subtle yet heavy. When devotion turns a man into a mirror of his master, what happens when the master's reflection becomes clouded, or when his path bends toward tragedy?
In a secluded mountain village where cedar forests murmured like ancient guardians, the tale of teacher Genzo endured through centuries, carried in the fragile breath of folklore, yet rooted in the unshakable soil of samurai ethics. There, amid the simple wooden homes standing against winter winds, Genzo's household became the silent stage for one of the most tragic demonstrations of loyalty ever recorded. Once a devoted retainer to a noble lord who had fallen into disgrace and exile, Genzo lived with a quiet dignity, neither lamenting his master's downfall nor allowing bitterness to corrode the oath he had sworn. When the lord's young son was entrusted to his care, Genzo treated the child not merely as a guest, but as a final remnant of a duty that time had not extinguished. Under his roof lived also an adopted son, a diligent student whose calm determination brightened the dim evenings spent by the hearth. The two boys trained side by side, shared meals, laughter, and the quiet ambitions of youth, unaware that destiny was weaving a harsh design around them. When a group of pursuers arrived in the village, intent on extinguishing the last trace of the exiled lord's bloodline, Genzo realized that only one path remained, a path paved with sacrifice, demanded by the iron weight of loyalty. With a steady hand and a heart torn by invisible wounds, he decided to save the lord's child by giving up the life of the boy he had raised as his own. The adopted son understood long before words were spoken. In the dim glow of the lantern, he bowed deeply, his expression serene in the face of approaching death, accepting that his life served a greater purpose. His last request, that his mother be told he died honorably, pierced the quiet like a blade of sorrow.
While the real heir was hidden safely, the young student stepped forward to meet the pursuers, carrying himself with a composure that belied his age, becoming both shield and symbol, a soul offered willingly for the preservation of another's future. Meanwhile, the mother of the adopted boy waited at home, listening to the distant thunder of hooves fading with the night wind. She prayed not for her son's safe return, but for the meaning of his sacrifice to be fulfilled. For in her heart, she knew that a samurai's love was not bound by possession, but by duty, and that the price paid had lifted her family into the realm of silent, eternal honor. In this sorrowful union of devotion, every tear shed became a testament to the belief that true love may take the form of letting go, of honoring the greater path to which one is bound. The tale of Genzo lived on precisely because it revealed the raw core of samurai morality, that the deepest affection often hid behind unspoken obligation, and that loyalty, when joined with sacrifice, molded ordinary lives into legends. Yet the silence that followed the tragedy left one question lingering across generations, a question that the village elders whispered when lanterns burned low. If duty demanded such a price from a household of humble hearts, what inferno awaited those whose loyalty was tested on the grand fields of war, where the conflict between love and honor grew even more merciless?
Across the shifting centuries of Japan's turbulent history, few stories captured the torment of Bushido as profoundly as the fate of Shigemori, a samurai born into a house torn by political storms and bound by a lineage of unwavering loyalty. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the sky lingered between darkness and fragile light, Shigemori walked the narrow path between devotion to his father and service to his lawful master, knowing that whichever thread he followed would inevitably lead to the tearing of another. His father, a powerful figure ensnared in rebellion, had stepped onto a road that threatened the established order. Yet his master, the rightful suzerain, demanded obedience from all who bore the family crest. Between these two unyielding pillars, Shigemori stood alone, a man whose heart trembled beneath the weight of conflicting oaths. Tradition taught that filial piety was sacred, but Bushido carried an even sterner command. When personal affection clashed with the duty owed to one's lord, a warrior must silence his heart and uphold the path of honor. In the dim stillness of his chambers, surrounded by the soft rustle of hanging scrolls depicting ancestors who had faced their own bitter crossroads, Shigemori understood that choosing either side meant betrayal. He could not raise his sword against his father without tearing apart the essence of his blood, yet he could not betray his suzerain without extinguishing the flame of honor that defined him. The tragedy of the samurai lay not in fear, but in clarity. He saw the inevitable end approaching, yet the code offered no refuge, no compromise, no gentle passage between these two forces. His decision unfolded with the quiet dignity of ritual. Rather than allow his divided loyalties to shake the moral foundations of his house, Shigemori chose a path that neither condemned his father nor betrayed his master. He accepted death as the only resolution that preserved honor on all sides. The chronicles describe how he prepared himself with the composure of a man who understood that life, when weighed against the purity of duty, held no lasting substance. And while the world outside stirred with rebellion and shifting alliances, he stepped willingly into the silence that awaited him, offering his life so that shame would not stain either the familial bond or the vassal's oath. His mother, like many women of the era shaped by the same stern virtues,
had raised him with the expectation that a samurai must walk toward sacrifice without hesitation, believing that to serve one's master was the highest form of love a son could show. Her eyes, though shadowed by grief, carried a calm acceptance, a reflection of Japan's cultural truth that true devotion did not cling, but released, trusting that loyalty to the highest principle purified all suffering. In such homes, children grew up understanding that destiny might one day demand the quiet offering of their lives, and mothers, though their hearts trembled, stood beside them with unwavering resolve. The legend of Shigemori endured because it revealed the quiet catastrophe that lived at the core of Bushido, the knowledge that love, in the samurai world, could be reshaped by duty until it became indistinguishable from sacrifice. And yet, as elders retold his fate in hushed tones, another dilemma emerged from the shadows of his story. If a warrior could die to preserve two loyalties at once, what hope remained for those forced to challenge their masters not out of rebellion, but out of conscience?
Through the narrow corridors of feudal Japan, where tatami floors remembered every footstep and where the lantern light cast disciplined shadows along earthen walls, loyalty often revealed itself not in obedience, but in the restrained tension between conscience and command. The samurai world, though bound by an oath of service, did not demand blind submission. Rather, it called for a vassal whose spirit stood upright, steady as a straightened bow, capable of facing his lord with truth even when truth cut deeper than any blade. Chronicles tell of retainers who approached their masters with measured voices, offering counsel born not from pride, but from the solemn belief that loyalty reached its highest form when it protected the master from dishonor, even at the cost of personal peril. Their words, spoken in hushed tones behind closed doors, carried the gravity of men who served not for reward, but for the preservation of righteousness. In these moments of conflict, when the master's will diverged from the path of wisdom, samurai stepped onto a tightrope suspended between reverence and defiance. They knew that contradiction could be mistaken for rebellion, yet silence could allow injustice to take root. Those who dared to speak did so with hearts steady but hands trembling beneath their sleeves, for the bond between lord and vassal was as fragile as it was sacred. When reason failed to alter a dangerous command, some warriors chose the only proof strong enough to convey sincerity: the offering of their own blood. A vassal who took his life before his master's eyes did not reject authority. He begged the master to see the peril of a chosen path, using death as the final argument, the last shield raised to protect the house from ruin. This austere tradition drew a clear line between noble loyalty and its corrupt distortion. Those who bowed excessively, flattering for favor, were condemned as nation, their devotion polluted by the desire for approval rather than by the purity of duty. Others, who clung to privilege like ivy around a crumbling stone, were known as chōshin, men whose loyalty evaporated the moment rewards ceased to glimmer. Such figures, dismissed in both chronicles and moral teachings, embodied the caution that loyalty without sincerity became a hollow performance, unworthy of the warrior's name. Bushido demanded a conscience aligned with honor, not a spirit bent under the weight of servile submission. The samurai who walked the true path therefore lived in perpetual balance, understanding that their service belonged not solely to a man, but to the principle he represented. When command corrupted itself, when authority drifted from righteousness, loyalty quietly shifted from the master's person to the master's intended virtue. This subtle distinction formed the spiritual equality at the heart of Bushido. A vassal did not kneel out of weakness, but out of chosen alignment with an ethical ideal. And he remained steadfast only as long as the master's actions resonated with that ideal.
Yet this fragile equilibrium kindled a question feared even by the oldest retainers, and whispered only in the stillness of night. When conscience and authority both claim the mantle of righteousness, and a warrior stands alone between them, to which side must he let his final breath fall?
Across the long arc of Japanese history, as feudal lords vanished into dust and castles crumbled under the weight of changing eras, the spirit of loyalty endured like an ember protected beneath layers of ash, glowing quietly yet refusing to fade. What had begun as the strict code of a warrior class gradually transformed into the lifeblood of an entire culture, shaping not only the conduct of men in armor, but the manners of merchants, the diligence of artisans, and the unspoken obligations within families that stretched their roots into every village and city. Even when the last samurai laid down his sword, the moral architecture built by centuries of service did not collapse. It simply shifted its form, turning into a quiet discipline that breathed through social harmony and collective purpose. To remain faithful was no longer a matter of life and death, yet the echo of those ancient vows reverberated through the chambers of modern identity. For the samurai themselves, the belief that life gained value only through devotion became a final truth carried to the very end. A warrior who surrendered his breath for the sake of duty was not considered lost, for his death lifted him beyond the fragile limits of existence. In the eyes of those who survived, he did not fall, he ascended into a realm where honor hardened into permanence, where names lived down through generations like stone markers along the path of memory. To give one's life was not to diminish its worth, but to magnify it. For the samurai saw mortality as a vessel meant to be poured out in service, leaving behind not the tragedy of an ending, but the radiance of fulfilled purpose. As the centuries unfolded, this ethos seeped into the rhythm of daily life. Children absorbed it in the way they bowed to elders. Apprentices felt it in the silent expectation to respect their craft. Officials carried it in their sense of responsibility toward the state. Even those untouched by the sword found meaning in the belief that service, whether to family, community, or nation, was an offering that strengthened the whole. Thus, loyalty ceased to be merely a vassal's duty and grew into an enduring cultural heartbeat, one that reminded each generation that the worth of a life rested not in individual triumphs, but in steadfastness of character. In the quiet shrines where incense curled upward toward beams darkened by centuries, offerings were laid not only for the gods, but for the loyal dead, whose stories shaped the land. Their devotion became a kind of immortality, a presence felt rather than seen, as if their spirits still walked beside the living, urging them to uphold the dignity they once guarded with their lives. And in this lingering influence, loyalty transcended the boundaries of time, forming a bridge that connected past and present, mortal breath and eternal memory. Yet the essence of this legacy lived most powerfully in a single truth whispered across generations, a truth that condensed centuries of sacrifice into one final meditation. True loyalty begins where the sword falls from the hand, for the heart that continues to serve beyond death is the heart that never leaves the world at all.